I never meant to become her, the woman who betrayed her vows for a weekend of stolen breath and aching skin. But I did. I let desire blind me. Let loneliness justify what I knew was wrong. I shattered something sacred for moments that felt like fire but turned to ash. Now I stare at my reflection and feel nothing but disgust. I want to scream, to undo it all, but I can't. I crossed the line, and I can never go back. I always thought of myself as grounded, a woman of quiet routines, stable love, and unshakable values. Life in Kansas City had been predictable, even comforting. I was a high school counselor, married for nearly 2 decades to a good man named Paul. Our life was tidy, weeknight dinners, long walks with our dog, family holidays that always ended with the same board game and the same inside jokes. I wasn't unhappy, at least. I didn't think I was. But looking back now, I realize I had stopped feeling much of anything. I moved through my days like clockwork, reliable and composed, but there was a part of me buried so deep I didn't even know it was starving. I told myself this year's fall trip to the Ozarks would be a chance to breathe. To reset, just me, the woods, and the familiar cabin Paul and I had visited every November since we married. But when he told me he couldn't come, and insisted I shouldn't go alone after my recent health scare, I felt the first ripple of something I couldn't name. Then he mentioned Christian, his younger colleague, recently divorced, happy to tag along. I didn't know then, but that moment quietly changed everything. I told Paul it wasn't necessary, that I was fine, that I needed the solitude. But he was persistent, and the worried look in his eyes disarmed me. Just let him drive up with you, help you get settled. You shouldn't be out there alone after everything. He said, after everything. He meant the dizzy spell in the kitchen last month. The 2 nights in the hospital. I gave in. That's how I found myself pulling into a gas station on the edge of town to meet Christian, a man I barely knew. He was leaning against his truck, sunglasses on, his hands tucked into the pockets of his faded jeans. I recognized him from Paul's office holiday party a year ago. He'd been newly divorced then. Quiet but polite, with a kind of distant smile that made me curious. He straightened when he saw me and offered a grin that landed deeper than it should have. The drive into the Ozarks was full of light conversation, music, trees, winding roads, but beneath it was something else. Something I wasn't ready to name. I kept stealing glances at his profile. The way his jaw clenched when he concentrated. The worn leather of his hands on the steering wheel. He smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. Something masculine and clean that reminded me of a feeling I hadn't had in years. I hated how aware I was of him. Of the way my body responded. Warm and restless in the passenger seat. When we arrived at the cabin, the sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the clearing. I showed him inside, flipping on the generator and giving him the short tour. It's rustic, I said, laughing nervously, but peaceful. It's perfect, he said, eyes lingering on mine for a moment too long. Later, while I unpacked groceries in the kitchen, I heard the water start upstairs, Christian in the shower. I tried not to imagine it, but the thought slipped in anyway. The heat of the water, his skin slick and steaming. I caught myself staring at nothing, my breath shallow. What are you doing? I scolded myself, but the ache remained. When he came down, towel slung low around his waist, droplets still clinging to his chest. I froze. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did. Mind if I make some tea? He asked casually. His voice deep, warm. I nodded, not trusting my voice. That night, we sat on the couch, firelight dancing across the walls, talking about everything and nothing. There was a moment, too long, too quiet, when our eyes locked. Neither of us moved, but everything shifted. My heart pounded, my hands trembling slightly beneath the throw blanket. Desire, like a slow fever, crept in, not wild or reckless, but terrifyingly intimate. I wanted to feel something again. To be wanted, to be seen, and for the first time in a long while, I was. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed beneath flannel sheets, the fire still glowing faintly in the great room below. Every creak in the cabin seemed louder in the silence, every flicker of memory from the day sharper. I kept seeing him, Christian, standing in the kitchen, steam rising from his shoulders, the towel low on his hips. The way his voice wrapped around me, calm and steady, had echoed through my body long after he went back upstairs. I pressed my eyes shut, trying to force sleep, but it was no use. I wasn't tired, I was restless, hungry, in a way that made me ache. By morning, a light fog had settled over the forest. The world felt hushed. I padded into the kitchen in leggings and an oversized flannel. Hair tied up, face bare. I wasn't trying to impress him, not intentionally, but when Christian turned from the window and saw me, the way his eyes lingered said more than words could. "Sleep okay?" he asked, pouring coffee into a mug. "Not really," I admitted, wrapping my hands around the warmth of the cup he handed me. Our fingers touched, just for a second, but something passed between us, electric. Unspoken. We spent the morning clearing brush near the tree line. I showed him the trail Paul and I had made years ago. The one that curved down to the creek where deer came to drink. Christian was strong, silent when he worked. He didn't speak unless I did. And yet somehow, it didn't feel awkward. It felt easy, natural, comfortable in a way that unsettled me. Around midday, we stopped to rest. He pulled off his jacket, sweat lining the collar of his shirt, and sat on a fallen log. I joined him, our knees brushing. Neither of us moved. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't hide. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I think I've forgotten how to be anything other than fine." He nodded slowly, not pushing, just listening. "That's what broke me open. I love my husband," I continued, eyes on the trees, "but sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing. Like I've become this quiet version of myself I don't even recognize anymore." Christian didn't offer comfort. He didn't tell me it was normal. He simply reached for my hand, and held it, gently, carefully, like he knew it meant something. The touch burned. I didn't pull away. That evening, back at the cabin, we ate by the fire. He cooked. I opened wine. Laughter came easier than I expected. So did the way we leaned in closer. The way my hand rested on his thigh when I laughed too hard. The way he didn't move it. And when the fire had burned low and the silence stretched too long again, I whispered, "We shouldn't." He leaned in, brushing a lock of hair from my cheek. His voice barely audible. "I know." But neither of us stopped. His lips were warm when they found mine, soft, searching, careful, but that care only made the moment more dangerous, more powerful. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. My breath caught, and for a few suspended seconds, the only sound in the cabin was the faint pop of the fire. Then something inside me gave way, not in fear, but in surrender. I kissed him back. It wasn't urgent. It wasn't rushed. It was slow and deliberate. Like we both knew what this meant, and were too far gone to pretend otherwise. His hand came up to my cheek, fingertips grazing my jaw, and I leaned into him without even realizing it. The feel of his skin, his scent, the warmth of his body, it awakened something in me I had forgotten was there. When we finally pulled apart, we didn't speak. We just looked at each other, eyes searching, heavy with questions neither of us dared to ask. "I should go," I whispered, but I didn't move. He looked down at our hands, still resting together on the worn couch cushion. "Do you want to?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer. Instead, I let my fingers trace the line of his wrist, the rise of his forearm. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the flush spreading over my skin. I was too aware of everything, of how close he was, of the weight of the silence, of the firelight flickering across his face. "I don't know how to come back from this," I said. "Maybe you don't have to," he replied, his voice barely audible. "Maybe this is where you come back to life." That undid me. When he leaned in again, I didn't resist. Our mouths met, and this time there was heat behind it, need, ache, longing. His hand slid to my waist, gripping gently, pulling me closer until I was nearly in his lap. I could feel the tension in his body, held back, restrained, and the part of me that had been numb for so long sparked awake. My hands explored him slowly, sliding over his shoulders, his chest, learning the shape of someone new. Someone who saw me, not as a wife, not as a role, but as a woman. I felt alive again, terrified, yes, but alive. We didn't make love that night. We didn't go that far. But we came close. Skin touched skin. My shirt was lifted over my head, his breath warm against my collarbone. We fell asleep tangled on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms like a secret. The fire had died by morning. A chill crept into the cabin. But neither of us moved. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Christian's heartbeat steady beneath my cheek. I knew the moment would end. But for now, it was ours. And I wasn't ready to let go. When I finally stirred, sunlight was filtering softly through the cabin windows, casting golden lines across the wooden floor. Christian was still asleep, one arm wrapped loosely around my waist, his breath warm against the curve of my neck. I didn't want to move, not because I was tired, but because leaving that cocoon meant returning to the world we didn't belong to. The real world, the one where this wasn't allowed. I slid out of his embrace gently, standing in the quiet kitchen as the coffee brewed. My skin still tingled where his hands had touched me. Every step I took felt like walking a line between guilt and longing. When Christian appeared behind me, hair tousled and shirtless, I caught my breath. "Morning," he said, voice low and rough from sleep. I turned, mug in hand, unsure whether to speak or kiss him. He crossed the room in 2 strides and answered the question for me. This time, there was no hesitation. His mouth found mine like it belonged there. The kiss was deeper, hungrier. His hand slid into my hair, then down to the curve of my spine, pulling me against him. I gasped as his lips left mine to explore my neck, my shoulder, the slope of my collarbone. "We said it was a mistake," I whispered, but even as the words left me, I arched toward him. "I know," he murmured against my skin, "but I don't regret it." Neither did I. My shirt fell to the floor. Then his. The edge of the kitchen counter pressed into my back as his hands traced lines across my waist. My ribs. My bare hips. The room was filled with soft sounds, breathless sighs, whispered names, the creak of the floor beneath shifting weight. It wasn't wild. It wasn't reckless. It was slow and deliberate, as if we were both memorizing every second. And I let him. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like a wife betraying her vows. I felt like a woman rediscovering her body. Her hunger, her sense of being desired. With Christian, it wasn't just about pleasure, it was about being touched like I mattered. About being held like I wasn't invisible. Afterward, we sat on the floor wrapped in a blanket. Bodies tangled and hearts pounding. I could feel the weight of it settling in already, the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. "I don't want to hurt anyone," I said softly, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. "You didn't come out here to hurt anyone," Christian replied. "You came out here to breathe." His words sank into me, comforting and dangerous all at once. I didn't reply. I just leaned into him, eyes closed, heart full of fire and ash. I knew this couldn't last. I knew it would end. But part of me didn't care. Because for the first time in years, I had touched something real. And it had touched me back. The hours after were filled with a strange, aching quiet. We didn't speak much as we dressed. The sound of zippers and footsteps filling the cabin instead of conversation. Christian moved around me gently, offering a small smile, a hand at my back when I passed by him. A softness in his gaze that unsettled me more than anything. Because it wasn't just sex. It had never been just sex. We took the trail behind the cabin that afternoon, winding down through the trees toward the old wooden overlook that jutted out above the valley. I needed air, space, a way to think, but he came with me anyway. And I didn't ask him not to. The trees blazed with early November color, gold, crimson, fading green, but I barely saw them. My thoughts swirled, my body still humming from what we'd done. From the intimacy that went far deeper than I'd prepared for. We stood at the edge of the overlook, the wind cold against my skin. Christian stood behind me, close but not touching. I could feel the restraint in his silence. The tension between what we were both thinking and what we were too afraid to say. Finally, I spoke. "I don't know how to go back," I said, "to my husband, to pretending this didn't happen." Christian's voice was quiet. "Maybe you're not supposed to pretend." I turned to him slowly. And he was watching me, not like a man full of conquest, but like someone trying to figure out if he should let himself fall further. His hand reached for mine, his thumb tracing slow, aching circles across my knuckles. I thought I was done feeling this way. I whispered, my voice catching. I thought maybe that part of me was just gone. He didn't answer, not with words. Instead, he pulled me into him gently. his hands sliding to my waist as his forehead pressed to mine. His breath was warm against my lips, and I could feel the hesitation there, like he was giving me every chance to step back. To say no, but I didn't. Our mouths met again, slower this time, deeper, the kind of kiss that didn't demand, but promised. I melted into him, my fingers curling into the fabric of his jacket. My back met the rough wood of a tree as his hands found my hips. Then my thighs, and everything around us fell away again, just breath and skin and the desperate need to feel something that couldn't be spoken aloud. The cold didn't matter. The rules didn't matter. Only the way his hands fit around my body. The way his mouth knew exactly where to linger. We didn't rush. We let it burn. And afterward, we stood tangled in silence. Our foreheads touching. Our pulses slowing in unison. I knew we were balancing on a razor's edge. One word from home, one phone call, and it would all crash down. But for now, we stayed wrapped in the warmth we had found. And neither of us let go. That night, back at the cabin, the fire crackled steadily, but the silence between us was anything but calm. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, half-eaten plates of food cooling between us, our gazes touching and retreating like waves drawn by some invisible tide. Christian finally broke the stillness. "You're somewhere else." I nodded, biting my lower lip. "I'm in two places at once," I said softly. "Here, and everywhere I know I shouldn't be." He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes searching mine. "Then stay here, just for tonight. Don't let guilt steal this from you, too." I looked at him, and the weight of his words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. Because this wasn't just lust. It never had been. It was something raw and terrifyingly tender. Something that had cracked open the version of myself I'd carefully sealed away beneath years of marriage. Motherhood, stability, and sacrifice. I stood, pushing the chair back with a quiet scrape across the wood floor. His eyes followed me as I crossed the room. Slowly, deliberately, until I stood beside his chair. He rose to meet me, and we just stood there, inches apart, breathing each other in. Then I reached for him. His hands found my waist as mine slid up his chest. Memorizing the feel of him. The kiss was different this time, urgent. Yes, but threaded with something deeper. Something that felt like need and ache and maybe even grief for the lives we were about to fracture. I didn't care. Clothes fell away between gasps and whispers. His body pressed me gently but firmly against the wall. The warmth of his mouth moving down my neck. Over my shoulder. His hands reverent like I was something sacred. I felt alive in a way that was painful, because I'd forgotten what it meant to be seen. To be wanted, not out of duty or familiarity, but out of undeniable desire. When he lifted me into his arms, carrying me toward the bedroom, I didn't protest. I wrapped myself around him like I belonged there. And for a few perfect hours, we lost ourselves. He made love to me like it meant something. Like every breath, every sound, every shiver was a confession. And in return, I gave myself to him, not as someone sneaking through the dark, but as someone desperate to feel again. Afterward, we lay tangled beneath the heavy quilt, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my shoulder. "What happens when this ends?" I asked, my voice small in the dark. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, "Does it have to?" My heart sank and soared all at once. Because I didn't know the answer. And I wasn't sure which one I wanted more, the safety of going home, or the danger of never turning back. The next morning, the world outside was quiet, still blanketed in fog. As if the forest itself was holding its breath. I sat at the edge of the bed. Christian's arm still draped loosely over my waist. His breath warm and steady against my back. My body ached in the most delicious way. But my mind was beginning to spiral. I slipped out from under the covers, careful not to wake him. As my feet touched the cold wooden floor, a chill spread up my spine that had nothing to do with the air. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. The trees looked the same. The sun just beginning to cut through the fog, but I felt different. Something in me had shifted. And I didn't know how to carry it back home. Behind me, I heard the creak of the bed. "You okay?" Christian asked, his voice thick with sleep. "No," I whispered, still facing the glass. "Yes, I don't know." He got up, wrapped a blanket around his waist, and came to stand behind me. His hands settled gently on my hips. His lips brushing my shoulder. "You're thinking too much." "How can I not?" I turned to face him. "I've crossed a line I swore I never would. And I don't know what scares me more, the guilt, or the fact that I don't want to take it back." His expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "You were drowning. So was I. Maybe this isn't just about cheating or mistakes. Maybe it's about finally breathing." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "That's too easy. Life doesn't work that way." "Maybe it should," he murmured, his hand finding mine. We spent the rest of the morning in a haze of half-spoken thoughts and lingering touches. The heat between us hadn't faded, it had deepened, taken root. When he kissed me again, it was slower, heavier, full of meaning that terrified me. His mouth traveled along my collarbone, my ribs, his fingers tracing every inch like he was trying to memorize me. We made love again on the rug in front of the fire, tangled in sunlight and silence. It wasn't just desire, it was desperate, unfiltered need, like the more we touched, the more we postponed reality. And for a while, we did. But afterward, wrapped in his arms, I stared at the ceiling and knew the illusion couldn't last. My phone buzzed on the table. A message from Paul. "Just checking in. Love you." The words hit harder than I expected. Christian noticed the change in my breathing. "Is it him?" I nodded, not meeting his gaze. "He still trusts me. And you still love him?" he asked gently. I didn't answer right away. My voice was barely a whisper. "I think I do, but not like this. Not the way I thought I did." Christian's expression softened, but the tension was undeniable. We both knew we were standing on the edge of something dangerous, something we couldn't unlive. And the worst part? A piece of me didn't want to turn back. That afternoon, the silence between us changed. It wasn't charged like before. It was heavier, slower, like the weight of everything we'd shared was finally catching up to us. Christian and I moved around each other carefully, saying little, but watching each other constantly, as if we both knew the end was approaching and neither of us wanted to say it out loud. I stepped outside to clear my head. The crisp air hit my lungs like a wave, sobering and sharp. I walked down to the old woodpile behind the cabin, the scent of pine and earth grounding me. But even in that space, even with the sky stretching out overhead and the leaves rustling around me, I couldn't outrun the sound of his voice, or the feel of his hands. He followed me out minutes later, quietly, like he didn't want to startle me. He didn't speak right away, just stood behind me, close but not touching. "I feel like I've already lost you," he finally said. "You were never supposed to have me," I replied, turning to face him. His eyes darkened. "Then why does it feel like I did?" I didn't have an answer. I was already unraveling again, pulled between the woman I'd been for so long and the one he'd woken up inside me. I stepped closer, knowing I shouldn't, because I let you, I whispered, because I needed to feel this. You. Our mouths met again, one last time. Or maybe the start of something neither of us could name. It was deeper now, hungrier but sad, a kiss full of everything we couldn't say. Everything we didn't want to admit was already fading. Christian's hands gripped my waist like he was holding on to something slipping through his fingers. I pressed into him, needing the friction, the connection, the heat. My body betrayed me again, every nerve lit up, every part of me aching for more even as my mind screamed that this was wrong. But I couldn't stop. He pushed me gently back against the shed, his breath hot against my neck. Our clothes were a barrier we stripped away piece by piece, not with urgency, but with reverence. His mouth traced a path down my collarbone, my ribs, each kiss feeling like a goodbye wrapped in longing. And when we came together again, out there beneath the sky, with only the trees to witness, it was different. Slower, devastating, beautiful, like we both knew this couldn't last. So we carved it into our bodies like memory. Afterward, we lay in the grass, tangled in discarded clothes and fading sunlight. "Promise me something," I said, my voice hoarse. "Anything. If this is the last time. Don't forget it. Don't pretend it didn't matter." He turned to me, brushing a leaf from my hair. "I couldn't forget you if I tried." And somehow, that made it worse, because I knew I wouldn't forget him either. And what we'd done would never fully let me go. That night, the cabin felt colder, The fire still burned, but the warmth between us had shifted, no longer fueled by discovery or temptation, but by something that felt more like mourning. Christian sat on the couch, staring into the flames, his fingers cradling a cup of tea he hadn't touched. I stood at the kitchen counter, pretending to clean, wiping the same already clean glass over and over. I think this is the part where we say goodbye, I said quietly. He didn't turn. Is that what you want? My throat tightened. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked slowly toward the couch, lowering myself onto the cushion across from him. The shadows flickered across his face, catching on the sadness in his eyes. He looked tired. So did I. I don't know what I want, I admitted, my voice low, but I know what I have to do. His gaze finally met mine. Go back. I nodded. We both stared into the fire again, letting the silence settle between us like ash. There was no anger, no blame, just the shared ache of something that felt real in a world where it wasn't allowed to exist. I never meant for this to happen, I said. I didn't come out here looking for anything. I know, he replied. Neither did I. He set his mug down on the table and leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. But it happened, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't mean something. I swallowed hard. It meant too much. He looked at me then, really looked. So what now? I go home, I said, the words like lead on my tongue. I face the life I built. The man who still trusts me. The marriage that isn't broken. Just lost. Christian stood slowly, walking toward the window. Outside, the night wrapped around the forest like a blanket. He rested one hand against the glass. And me? I stood too, moving behind him, close enough to feel the heat of his back. You go on, I whispered. You heal, and you move forward, and maybe someday, you forget me. He turned to face me, his expression soft, unreadable. I won't. I reached up and cupped his cheek, letting my fingers memorize the texture of his stubble, the warmth of his skin. I wouldn't ask you to, I said, smiling sadly. Just, don't wait for me. Don't carry this. He leaned down, and for the last time, our lips met, slow, bittersweet, final, not a promise, not a beginning, a farewell. When he pulled away, neither of us spoke. I went to bed alone, staring at the ceiling, the weight of goodbye heavy in my chest. And in the morning, I left the cabin behind. But the woman who drove home was not the same one who had arrived. Something had been awakened inside me, and I knew the echoes of that weekend would follow me, whether I wanted them to or not. In today's fast-paced, emotionally distant world, it's easy to lose ourselves in routine, neglecting our needs, silencing our desires, and mistaking stability for fulfillment. This story reminds us that temptation often creeps in when emotional disconnection takes root. The most important lesson? Don't wait for a breaking point to start communicating. Talk to your partner. Express what you feel, what you miss, what you crave. Emotional intimacy is as vital as physical connection. If you feel invisible or unfulfilled, speak up, because the cost of silence isn't just loneliness, it's regret. And some lines, once crossed, can never truly be undone.